about what is still pending in the state Senate and House as it relates to voting measures going forward. Those who are in favor of the legislation, the various forms of that legislation as it has existed, insist that it is about securing the vote. It's not about limiting access to the ballot box, but rather making sure those who vote have their vote counted properly.
Absolutely. I think this all boils down to, I think we've seen in the last election that it has been a chaotic and confusing system and a confusing voting process. And I think this bill just is going to move us forward into restoring our confidence in the system. And because we really need to have that confidence in our government and our elected officials. And I think that's just all it's doing. It's just restoring that confidence and, making sure that everybody's voice and their vote is heard.
So what makes you believe that there shouldn't be existing confidence in the system, or that people's voices were not heard properly in the last Texas election?
Well, I just think that, the general consensus, and I think we've heard it from both sides that this is going on or that is not going on. And I think, this bill and what they're trying to do is just trying to shore that up and make sure that people go and, there were some issues with people like the ballot by mail. People were confused or, thinking that their vote wasn't counted or that it was, not was misappropriated. And I think these laws and this bill is just going to help shore that up so we can remain confident in that process.
Where do you think those concerns or fears come from, though?
I think it just comes from, a lot of the citizenship, a lot of people out there who just don't understand the process or don't, just there's some common issues or problems. And I think everybody should be concerned about that. And I think everybody should want to have that process, that they feel comfortable and they feel confident in our elected officials.
Sure. Bishop Dixon, from your perspective, what are your issues with the legislation as it stands? Do you understand the need to make sure that everybody's vote is counted as it should be, as people intend?
Well, Tom, first of all, thank you for having us on today. And thank you, Amy. Good to talk with you. The challenge that most of us have across the state and really, frankly, across the nation is that the present legislation in Texas, and of course, talking about 47 different states around the nation addressing this, is all predicated upon the boisterous claim that there was massive fraud in the election process in the past election. There was massive fraud in Harris County, Texas. There was massive fraud in the state and across the nation. And the challenge with that is no one has found that to be true. Even Republican judges in Harris County who analyzed, evaluated, investigated these claims have come forth to say there was zero evidence of these claims. And what I would like to ask, and we're still asking, is that the sponsors of the bills, including those who avidly support the bills, would explain to the public what is the basis of the fraud. If there was massive fraud, then we should have a problem. But this looks to us like a solutions that are looking for a problem to solve. And it's kind of like getting a surgery, a massive surgery done on your body because the doctor thinks there might be a sickness. No one would submit themselves to a surgical procedure that massive without there being firm evidence. In fact, you would get a second and a third opinion before you did those kind of major surgeries. We're doing major surgery to our voting system with laws that have no basis, no evidence of that there is a massive illness within the body politic.
Now, with the current Senate Bill 7, as it was passed in the House, now goes back to the Senate, it was watered down significantly. A lot of the restrictions on voting were removed from it. Are you more likely to support what is now going before the Senate than you were when it went to the floor of the House in the first place?
No, Tom, we still are not satisfied with that. And our legal minds in the NAACP are analyzing every detail of the bill and waiting to see what the final outcome of that bill looks like. We have not had a chance to review it yet from the perspective of our lenses of our lawyers, But hopefully, as soon as that bill is made available, that kind of examination will take place. But again, you start talking about closing down polling places. For example, in Harris County, well, let's start with this premise. The democracy is based on everyone having equal rights to voting. And that's the first thing. And this bill and these bills limit that and restrict voting access. In Harris County, for example, we had late night or all night polling places. There's nothing illegal about that. It just gave common everyday workers who work 3 to 6, 3 to 9, or 3 to 11 the opportunity to go and vote. It gave working people, working parents, single parents, access to the polls. That's not illegal. And this bill moves polling places out of urban centers, out of neighborhoods where primarily Black and brown people do live. That's restricted. That's voting restriction. And in the academic terminology, that's called voter suppression. Any act, legal or extra legal, that limits or restricts voting access or participation is deemed technically as voter suppression. And that's what we're really up in arms about here.
Can I pop in there? Reverend Dixon, Bishop Dixon, I really appreciate, hearing your views on this. And one of the things I want to address is when we talk about voter fraud, we're talking about voter irregularities. The bar to pass for fraud is such a high bar. There's a lot of legal, intent and all of that stuff. So there are a lot of voting irregularities. So let's just get that off the table. And those things need to be shorn up, and they need to be, done in a way that we restore the confidence. And I do not believe this is restricting people's access. It's just providing a uniform and standardized method of voting in Harris County and the state of Texas. So when we can talk about the 24-hour voting locations.
But can you mention those irregularities specifically, Amy, so that the public can hear specifically what massive irregularities were there that necessitates such an overhaul to the system of voting?
Yeah, there were some issues with, the mass send out of the ballot by mail applications. That just provides an opportunity. People really weren't knowing going on. There were people that could not track their ballot or track if they had it. There are some differences. The United States, there's not a overall voter registration, right? So there's 30 states that participate in a program called ERIC, which those states talk to each other. So there is, as part of their voter registration rights. So there is a problem where there's people that can be registered here and registered in other states and still have the opportunity to vote in those two states, either, accidentally or not realizing that they needed, that they moved or whatever the process was. I'm not, trying to cast or saying there's anything nefarious or illegal going on, but those things need to be shorn up, and those are voting rolls cleaned up, and they need to be. We don't need to have that opportunity. We're a very mobile society, and we have the ability and the means to do that. We just need to do that and restore our confidence back in our system.
So one thing that I've asked several elected officials and have not necessarily been able to get a direct answer, and maybe you have one, Ms. Holsworth, is Republicans did very well in Texas. They, from a statewide perspective, they won overwhelmingly. The former president, Trump, did incredibly well in the Valley, in an area where he wasn't expected to do as well. So why is it that a majority of Republicans, many of whom live here in the state of Texas, don't buy the election results as they were?
Because there was this confusion and there was this opportunity and these claims being made, and we just need to clean those up and make sure that everybody feels confident and secure. And at the end of the day, I really don't care who wins, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. I just want the people that vote, I want their voice to be heard and their vote to be counted, and everybody to be secure and confident in the system that we have.
When did you lose your confidence in the system, as so many Republicans have? Was it this cycle? Was it 2016? What happened specifically that caused you to lose confidence, as so many Americans claim to have lost their confidence in the voting system, not just here in Texas, everywhere?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of allegations coming out in 2016. I think we had was the Russian involvement and all of that things going on. And both sides were complaining about irregular things that they thought were happening in the system. So this is just not a Republican based one or a Democrat, and it shouldn't be. It should be something that citizens all want to do.
Sure.
But
Question.
if I can just insert this before you ask the question, Tom, it's more than ironic. In fact, it's suspiciously ironic that the claims of massive voter fraud happened after this past election, and it's amazing that all of a sudden there's this paranoia about defects in the process, when this process has elected Republicans, and we, all Americans, Democrats, others, accepted the election results and moved on. And I don't see how it is, we're still grappling with this, how it is that the claim of a fraudulent process, massive voter fraud, that has been the echoing theme and mantra of those who purport these new laws. And no one has stopped to say, if there's not massive fraud, why is there need for massive overhaul? If there needs to be minor tweaks to a system, we always do that procedurally. But to change an entire set of laws around the fraudulent claim or the deceitful claim that there's most massive voter fraud as a result of it, which is why you've got major leaders across the country who are both Democrat and Republican business leaders who are coming out against these measures, because it is clearly voter suppression. It brings back Jim Crow ideology into our electoral system, and it stifles the vote, which is not democratic. And that's the issues that we have with it. And it's going to hurt Texas's economy. The economy of Harris County is going to be impacted. It's dividing us more at a time when we need to be uniting more. And so a massive overhaul of a system with some minor concerns without any proven fraud is absolutely absurd. We believe, and it's clear, that this is about making sure that fewer and fewer Blacks and Browns have access to voting, and they're restricted so that a power base, preferred power base, can remain in power. It's changing the rules. It's moving the goalposts in the middle of a game to make sure the team that thinks it's deficient could win.
So Bishop, I'll ask you a similar question to what I asked Ms. Holsworth, and that is, in 2016, after President Trump beat Hillary Clinton, and it was an incredibly close election, you heard a lot of Democrats all over the country saying, well, he's not my president, I don't trust the results. And so my question is this really about voter suppression, or is it really about security? And it just so happens that now, for the second election in a row, people are concerned about the integrity. Does it have to be about voter suppression, or do you think there could be an element of security here, that people are concerned based on foreign actors trying to or successfully infiltrating our election system?
Well, Tom, I think if we look back at the 2016 election, first of all, let me speak for myself. I was not a Trump supporter, but I stood in my pulpit and publicly and said these words: as of today, President Donald Trump is our president. And I began to govern myself accordingly and advise others to do the same. And I know many leaders across the country who did the very same thing, because the electoral process in a democracy cannot be fight until we win, even after the fight is over, after the election is over. We should all be striving for that kind of country, that nation, where we agree to disagree, but when we elect a president, that person becomes the president of the United States of America. Never before have I seen in my lifetime what we saw happen in this past election, where you literally had congressional leaders claiming fraud and massive fraud when there was no evidence of it, and unwilling to vote to certify the results of the election. That's a new phenomenon in our history. And then, of course, on January 6th, we get the massive insurrection and the assault on the nation's capital, which is treason. So I've not seen that in my lifetime. And I don't want to talk about my age, but I've been around long enough. I've seen enough things happen. But so clearly, Tom, there were people who were upset, disenchanted, who said he was not my president, but we did not have this kind of massive outcry. We sure did not have people taken to the legislature to organize a massive voter suppression scheme nationwide with 40 plus states changing laws. We didn't get to that extent, and there were reasons why, because people swallowed hard and accepted the fact that the issue is settled, we now have a new president, we must follow that lead?
You know, we didn't do that in 2016. You're absolutely correct. For 4 years, we've heard he's not my president. There was all this outside influence on our elections. This year, we're hearing the same from the other side. I think this is just, these laws and these new regulations are just a way that we don't have to have these discussions anymore. We can shore up our system. I think when people have more.
Amy, let me ask you a question though. Do you think after the next election, after every election, there will be a disenchanted demographic who will be saying in the streets, this is not my president, or this is not my governor, this is not my mayor? But it's different. That's much different than going to the legislature on the false claims of fraud to change all of the laws and to impose punishment for people and to impose restrictions to people to move voting places, all of that based on a claim of fraud that doesn't exist. That did not happen in 2016, and no one can say that that happened with validity substantiating evidence, because it just didn't happen.
Well, in fairness, it didn't happen probably after 2016 because Democrats didn't control the House and the Senate in the state of Texas. Had they controlled it, it's possible that there could have been changes we saw, for example, Chris Hollins, right, use his authority to expand voting. So it's possible that we would have seen changes in 2016. I just wanted to insert that, but had Democrats had the ability to do it. Go ahead, Ms. Holsworth. I'll let you respond to.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is not about, he's not my president. You'll never hear me say that. President Biden is my president. He's our president, and we need to get behind him and go forward with that. But we just never need to have this situation again. And there were significant things that Chris Holland did in Texas and in Harris County that expanded and were different or contrary to what our voting regulations and our election code are. And just, to speak back about the 24-hour voting centers, we have 2 weeks of early voting, and that's in Harris County, and then, other counties that have smaller populations have a shorter early voting period. But, the whole issue of that is we are having difficulty finding qualified, certified people that understand the process, everyday Americans that want to go down and volunteer and work these long hours and work these 12, 14-hour days for 2 weeks period. And so, that just causes an issue when there's not, enough people that want to come in and take part of the process and want to do that. So, these are just common sense directives. And
Amy, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
To that very point, you mentioned that Chris Hollins enacted systems that expanded voter access. Is that not democratic to do? I mean, there was a time when stores closed at 6:00 p.m. They started opening at 9, then 10. Now we got 24-hour stores. I remember when stores did not open on Sundays, but merchants wanted access. What is undemocratic? What is unlawful? What is unfeasible about that? And we didn't find people complaining about that in Harris County who did work those hours, who did open those locations. That the complaints did not come from them. It came from the people who saw election turnout so high in districts, in the cities, in the areas where that does not favor the Republican Party.
Well, let me speak to that. I don't know where you didn't hear the complaints. I've actually worked in the county before, actually trying to find election judges and clerks and things to fill these roles. And it is very difficult. It's hard to find people that will take, especially for early voting, to take that 2 weeks out of their life, because these people have jobs, these people have families, have responsibilities to be able to do that, and to put that pressure on them for more hours. They have to take the training. Our training system was very intensive, which it well should be, because we need people that are qualified and know what they're doing, because we don't want to have mistakes made at the polling location where people feel like their vote was not heard. So
do you think the answer would be training more people? I mean, training more qualified people, which we have enough people to do that. Do we have to change the laws to prohibit that voting access, or should we just have a more robust plan to get more qualified people involved? Since it encouraged access to votes.
We should do that. And there are 20, you can vote, you can put your there's, you're 65 and older, or, all the qualifications where you can vote by mail. You can vote. It's not, drop your ballot by mail in the post office box. You're done. You're voted. I don't see what the issue is. You're not, people still have the opportunity to vote, but it needs to be done in a way that people feel it's safe, secure, that we have the qualified personnel that are there to help. And I wish more people, and Mr. Bishop, this would be a great thing to get out there, is that people do need to take involved and be involved in the system and come and volunteer and ask their counties and ask their parties how they can get involved and work these positions. So,
but I guess my question, and I'm trying to make sure I didn't miss your answer, but you mentioned that there was something perhaps not good or not sufficient, or not correct with the process that Chris Hollis did enact that allowed overnight voting, as if there was a defect with it, when it did give access to more citizens to take advantage of the opportunity to vote and to participate. I would think that in a democracy, that would be all of our goal. But before we had day school, now we have night schools because we're trying to give more people access to the opportunity. I think voting is that sacred of a right. We should do that. And if we need to train more people, train more people. But why stop? Why eliminate that when it did give more Texans opportunities to vote?
Well, I don't see why they don't have the opportunity for the 2 weeks before. They have ballot by mail. They have those opportunities, those 2 weeks that you can go. They're open Saturdays and Sundays and, every day. So, this overnight thing, that was an issue. There was not enough people that were there, and it was not utilized. There was not enough people to work it, to work those long hours. So, yeah, and I totally agree. We do need to get more people involved in your local elections. You need to get involved in your backyard and go and get trained and volunteer and want to be a part of the process.
And I think that's a good place to leave it, since we're actually agreeing on something, which is getting more people involved in the process, right? And I'll give each of you an opportunity to kind of say your final thoughts, and appreciate certainly you taking these 20 minutes to spend with us this afternoon to talk about what's an important issue, regardless of where you fall on it. Since Ms. Holsworth got the first word, we'll end with Bishop Dixon, but go ahead, Ms. Holsworth, and give us your final thoughts.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and Reverend Dixon, it's a pleasure talking to you, and thank you. I think we just need to look at this in a way that I want every American, every legal American who can vote, who is a citizen, and to exercise that right. And I just want to do that in a way that everybody feels that it's a safe, secure, and everybody's comfortable and believes in the process. I never want to go through another situation where we have this chaos and the division in our country. I think we need to unify and come together and think about how we can to move together as, Democrats, Republicans. I don't care who you are. We're Americans, and we need to do that together.
Bishop Dixon.
Well, thank you again, Tom, and thank you, Amy. Nice chatting with you as well. Look forward to doing it again, hopefully. I think that there's a reason why certified academics across the country who are neutral, whether Democrat or Republican, have deemed this end-time movement to be a massive voter suppression movement that is funded by millions and millions of dollars across the nation, 47 states simultaneously. That is no accident. That is not something that we just happen to see happening. And of course, it's all based on a massive propaganda campaign that there was massive chaos and massive fraud in the voting process, including the former president trying to get officials in the state of Georgia to go find votes. This was about who wins and who loses, as opposed to America winning regardless. And I think we got to be honest about that and own it, because the reality is it's voter suppression by every academic standard, and it's going to hurt our state. I do agree with Amy. We should be uniting around our common principles of democracy, and the right to vote is that sacred element. And when you take it away, when you challenge it, when you restrict people from it, you demean and diminish our democracy, and that's not good for civil society. We've got to own this and then be willing to fight to change it, to make sure that it's every person, every American, with the liberty and justice for all.